Louisiana is a state of secrets, of cypress swamps and second lines, of jazz that bleeds through the walls at midnight, and history that refuses to stay buried. But the biggest secret this state keeps is not locked in a vault in the Garden District or hidden behind the iron gates of an uptown mansion. It is the generational, compounding, hurricane-surviving power of black wealth that has been quietly accumulating here for centuries. We are not talking about athletes who signed a big contract and bought a boat. We are talking about families who held land before Lincoln signed a single document. Dynasties that survived Jim Crow by building their own financial systems when the system refused to let them in. Entrepreneurs who took catfish, concrete, and creativity and turned them into empires that are still paying dividends today. Stick around, because the family at number 1 did not just beat the odds. They rewrote the rulebook, sold it back to the industry, and used the profits to build a fortress that nothing in this country could knock down. Number 10. The Chase family. We begin in Treme, in the heart of New Orleans, with a family whose true wealth cannot be measured by a balance sheet alone. The Chase family, anchored for decades by the legendary Leah Chase, owns something far more valuable than a building or a stock portfolio. They own the room where history happened. To understand what the Chases are worth, you have to understand the currency that mattered most during the Civil Rights era. Dooky Chase Restaurant, established in 1941, was not simply a place to eat gumbo. It was a boardroom disguised as a dining room. During the 1960s, when Jim Crow laws made it illegal for black and white people to share public space, the upstairs room at Dooky Chase's became the one place in New Orleans where those laws ceased to exist. Thurgood Marshall planned a strategy there. Martin Luther King Jr. broke bread there. The Freedom Riders organized there. The NAACP plotted its next moves over plates of fried chicken that Leah Chase sometimes served for free, because she understood that feeding the revolution was its own form of investment. That social capital, accumulated over decades of hosting presidents and protesters alike, became the family's most durable asset. Economically, the Chase family represents the quiet power of New Orleans' black middle class. From George W. Bush to Barack Obama, presidents came to Dooky Chase's not just for the food, but for the legitimacy. That kind of access cannot be purchased at any price. The younger generation, including Edgar Dooky Chase IV, has expanded the brand into airport concessions at Louis Armstrong International, placing a legacy institution in front of millions of travelers every single year. And when Hurricane Katrina filled the restaurant with floodwater and developers circled like vultures ready to buy out distressed black landowners at pennies on the dollar, the Chase family looked them in the eye and said no. They rebuilt. They stayed. In Louisiana, the most powerful real estate decision you can make is refusing to leave the land your family has stood on for generations. Number 9, the Marsalis family. If the Chases nourish the soul of New Orleans through food, the Marsalis family owns the soul itself. In a city where music is not entertainment but oxygen, the Marsalis family sits on the throne. The patriarch, the late Ellis Marsalis Jr., was a jazz pianist and educator who did not simply raise 4 sons. He built a conglomerate of human talent that has dominated the global music industry for 4 straight decades. Wynton Marsalis serves as the artistic director of jazz at Lincoln Center in New York City, commanding a budget that exceeds $50 million annually and overseeing one of the most valuable cultural real estate footprints in all of Manhattan. He was the first jazz musician in history to win the Pulitzer Prize for Music, a distinction that elevated an entire genre into the same intellectual and financial conversation as classical composition. Branford Marsalis spent years leading the Tonight Show band, collecting network television income at a time when that meant serious money. Delphio and Jason complete a dynasty whose Grammy collection alone tells a story of sustained excellence at the absolute peak of the art form. But here is what separates the Marsalis family from ordinary musicians. They institutionalized their craft. Their wealth is built on touring, on publishing rights, on educational institutions, and on global partnerships that most performers never even know are possible, and they brought the money home. The Ellis Marsalis Center for Music in the 9th Ward is a multi-million-dollar facility that serves as both monument and incubator. It anchored the Musicians' Village, a project that rebuilt homes for artists who lost everything in Katrina. That is how you convert fame into infrastructure. That is how a music dynasty becomes a civic institution. Number 8, the Charbonnet family. In New Orleans, death is not just an ending, it is a parade, a ceremony, a neighborhood-wide celebration of a life fully lived. And the family that has controlled the ritual of transition in this city for nearly a century and a half holds a power that most people cannot fully comprehend. The Charbonnet family, proprietors of Charbonnet Là-Bas Funeral Home in Treme, represent something rare in American business. Staying power is measured not in decades, but in generations. This institution was founded in 1883, more than 140 years of continuous black ownership in a neighborhood that has survived Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the Great Depression, and a Category 5 hurricane. To appreciate what that means, you have to understand what the black funeral director represented in the segregated South. When white banks refused to lend and white insurance companies refused to cover, the funeral director was often the only member of the community who commanded significant liquidity and knew how to navigate paperwork, bureaucracy, and financial systems. They became de facto bankers, community anchors, quiet pillars of economic stability. The Charbonnet family handles the funerals of the city's musicians, cultural icons, and social leaders. When a jazz funeral moves through the streets of Treme behind a horse-drawn carriage with a brass band leading the second line, it is often the Charbonnets who have orchestrated every detail. These are not simple affairs. They are complex logistical productions that require permits, musicians, transportation, and reception coordination. The economics rival a high-end wedding. In their historic building on St. Philip Street stands as a fortress of black ownership in a neighborhood under constant pressure from gentrification. They own the land, they own the history, and they hold the contract on dignity. In a state that worships its ancestors, that is an unassailable position of power. Number 7, the McKenna family. Information has always been power, and in New Orleans, the McKenna family controls the narrative. Dr. Dwight McKenna and his wife Beverly Stanton McKenna have built a portfolio that bridges medicine, media, and history in a way that few families anywhere in the country have managed to pull off. The crown jewel of their influence is the New Orleans Tribune, a newspaper they founded in 1985. But they did not simply launch a publication. They deliberately revived the name of the first black daily newspaper ever printed in America, originally published in 1864, positioning themselves as the rightful continuation of a lineage of black resistance through print. Owning a media outlet in a city like New Orleans gives the McKenna family a form of leverage that cannot be replicated. They control which stories get told, which businesses get promoted, and which politicians get scrutinized. That kind of editorial power translates directly into political influence. Their tangible assets are just as impressive. They own real estate throughout the city, including Lemou's DFPC, the Museum of the Free People of Color, housed in a historic mansion on Esplanade Avenue, a street that was once exclusively reserved for the white, Creole elite. Inside that building sits a collection of original manuscript papers, passports of free people of color dating back to the 1800s, and rare artwork that the city's mainstream museums ignored for a century. By privately holding this history, the McKennas ensure it cannot be erased, repackaged, or sold to the highest bidder. They are the intellectual guardians of Louisiana's black story, and in a city that sells its culture to the world every single day, controlling the archive is one of the most valuable positions on the board. Number 6, the Coaxum family. Now we shift from culture and history to pure operational dominance. Henry Coaxum is a franchise mogul, and in Louisiana, his name carries serious commercial weight. As the head of a growing network of McDonald's restaurants across the New Orleans region, Coaxum built his empire the slow way. He started as a manager trainee in 1984 and did not buy his first store until 2002. What happened after that is a masterclass in patient execution. In a major tourist city like New Orleans, a high-volume McDonald's franchise is not a small business. It is a cash machine. The barrier to entry is enormous. requiring hundreds of thousands in liquid capital just to be considered. Once you are inside the system, the returns can be staggering. His organization employs hundreds of people and generates tens of millions in annual revenue. But Coaxum's reach extends well past the drive-through window. He sits on the boards of the city's most powerful civic institutions, influencing economic development decisions and policy discussions that shape the entire region. He is a fixture in the New Orleans Business Council, a room where the city's economic future is negotiated behind closed doors. When Hurricane Katrina destroyed his locations, Coaxum did not hesitate. He rebuilt. In many cases, he reopened his restaurants before the surrounding city had even restored basic services, providing food and Wi-Fi to residents and relief workers who had nowhere else to turn. His Canal Street flagship became a symbol of Black corporate resilience in the middle of the city's worst moment. The lesson is simple. Henry L. Coaxum did not invent anything. He mastered a global system and executed it with such precision that he became an irreplaceable part of the local economy. That is a form of power that speaks for itself. Number 5, the Henry family. There are people who construct buildings, and then there are people who decide where buildings go, how they get funded, and who benefits when they are finished. Troy Henry and his family fall firmly into the second category. As the founder of Henry Consulting, a management and engineering firm that handles the complex machinery of billion-dollar public-private projects, Troy Henry operates at the intersection of government, finance, and infrastructure. His background includes senior roles at Fortune 500 companies like IBM, and he brought that level of corporate sophistication back to New Orleans and put it to work for the city. His firm has been involved in major redevelopment undertakings, including projects tied to the reinvention of some of New Orleans' most iconic sites. These are not simple construction contracts. These are layered public-private partnerships that require equal mastery of engineering specifications, municipal finance, community negotiations, and executive decision-making. But the Henry family does not just collect fees. They own equity. They hold stakes in real estate ventures, fuel distribution, and development projects aimed at bringing essential retail infrastructure to underserved neighborhoods. That combination of purpose and profit is rare. Most consultants work for the deal. The Henry family works for the long-term asset. They are the bridge between City Hall and Wall Street. When Louisiana needs someone to sit at the table where the biggest decisions get made, Troy Henry is the person who walks in the room with the blueprint already drawn. Number 4, the Williams brothers. Let us leave the boardrooms for a moment and go back to the block. Specifically, the Magnolia Projects of New Orleans, where two brothers looked at a $10,000 budget and built an operation that would generate hundreds of millions of dollars and reshape the economics of the entire music industry. Brian Birdman Williams and Ronald Slim Williams are not simply rappers. They are the most strategically successful record executives in the history of hip-hop, and that is not a debatable point. The decision that changed everything was made in 1998. At a time when young Black artists across America were signing deals that stripped away their rights in exchange for a modest advance, the Williams brothers sat across the table from Universal Records and negotiated something that had never been done before at that level. They received a $30 million advance and retained 85% of their royalties. They kept their masters. They kept their publishing. They kept control. When Juvenile, Lil Wayne, Drake, and Nicki Minaj sold hundreds of millions of records through Cash Money, the overwhelming majority of those profits flowed directly back to a family from the Magnolia Projects. They were not working for the label. They were the label. Birdman has been estimated to have a net worth as high as $150 million. But the combined wealth generated by Cash Money Records over 3 decades likely surpasses $500 million in gross revenue. Slim Williams, the quieter brother, is known in business circles for investment discipline that often gets overshadowed by his brother's visibility. Do not be fooled by the diamonds and the Bugattis. The flashy lifestyle was always a marketing strategy. They understood that excess, when deployed correctly, sells products. The Williams brothers turned a recording studio on the south side of New Orleans into one of the most lucrative independent music operations in American history. And they did it by refusing to give away the one thing that mattered most: ownership. Number 3, the McDonald family. While the Williams brothers were generating hundreds of millions in music revenue, the McDonald family was doing something equally important. They were building the institution that would hold the money. Alden McDonald is the CEO of Liberty Bank, one of the largest black-owned banks in the United States, and his family represents the financial backbone of Black Louisiana. Founded in 1972, Liberty Bank has grown to hold assets exceeding $1 billion. Alden McDonald has led this institution for over 50 years, a tenure almost unheard of anywhere in modern banking. His son Todd is now stepping into the role, extending the dynasty into its next chapter. This transition keeps the family at the center of institutional leadership. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what it meant for black entrepreneurs in the South to have no access to capital. For generations, mainstream banks rejected black business owners outright. Liberty Bank existed to fill that void. It financed first-time homeowners, small business operators, and community developers who would have been turned away everywhere else. When Hurricane Katrina submerged the city, Liberty Bank's headquarters went underwater with the rest of New Orleans. Their data centers flooded. Most small institutions would have folded under that kind of pressure. The McDonald family did not. They operated out of trailers, fought for federal support, and then went on the offensive, acquiring banks in Kansas City, Detroit, and Jackson, Mississippi. They turned a disaster into an expansion strategy. The McDonald family controls the flow of capital in Louisiana. They decide who gets the mortgage and who gets the small business loan. In a capitalist system, the person who holds the keys to the vault holds the keys to everything. And in Louisiana, the McDonald family has been wearing those keys around their neck for more than half a century. Number 2, the Miller family. If Cash Money negotiated the greatest record deal in hip-hop history, Percy Master P. Miller built the greatest diversified business empire the music world has ever produced. And he did it with a clarity of vision that most MBA graduates never develop. The origin story has become legend at this point. Percy Miller received a $10,000 settlement check connected to his grandfather's death. He used it to open a record store in Richmond, California. He brought the operation back to New Orleans and launched No Limit Records with a strategy so simple, it was almost embarrassing in its effectiveness. He flooded the market. He released album after album after album using a rapid manufacturing approach that kept No Limit on the charts for years without pause. But music was just at the front door. Behind it was an entire city of businesses. No Limit Films, a clothing line, a sports management agency, a toy company, food brands, real estate. At one point, No Limit was generating $400 million in annual revenue in a single year. And because Master P owned the means of production, controlled the distribution, and operated his own marketing channels, the bulk of that money stayed in the family. His net worth has been estimated between $200 million and $250 million. But the true measure of the Miller family's wealth is generational. He raised his son Romeo Miller to be an operator from childhood. Romeo went on to star in his own television series, play college basketball at the University of Southern California, and build his own portfolio of business ventures alongside his father. The Millers launched food brands designed to compete for shelf space in mainstream grocery stores, a move that reflects a deliberate strategy to own the everyday consumer transaction. They tried to acquire World Championship Wrestling. They negotiated NBA tryouts, not for the paycheck, but for the marketing exposure. Percy Miller understood something that very few people at his level understood at the time. You do not just want to earn money from the culture. You want to own the infrastructure that the culture runs on. That is the Miller family philosophy, and it has produced a dynasty that is still expanding today. Number 1, the Miller family. There was never really a debate. When you trace the full arc of black wealth in Louisiana, from the civil rights infrastructure of the Chases to the musical institutionalism of the Marsalis family, from the generational staying power of the Charbonnets to the banking sovereignty of the McDonalds, all of these stories are powerful. All of them matter. But when you look for the single family that combined the largest dollar amounts with the broadest business footprint, the most aggressive diversification, and the clearest blueprint for generational transfer of wealth, only one name rises to the top. Percy Miller built something that people told him was impossible. He came from the Calliope Projects in one of the most economically abandoned corners of New Orleans. He watched the music industry exploit artist after artist, taking their talent and leaving them with nothing. He decided that he would not let that happen to himself or his city. He built a system where the talent, the label, the distribution, the merchandise, the film, and the food all sat under the same roof. That roof belonged to him. When No Limit was at its peak, it was not just a record label. It was a Louisiana-based corporation competing at the highest level of American entertainment capitalism. The royalties, the real estate holdings across Louisiana and California, the food empire under Uncle P's brand, and the intellectual property catalog that continues to generate income decades later. All of it adds up to the most complete picture of self-constructed dynastic wealth in the state. Master P did not wait for someone to hand him a seat at the table. He built his own table, his own room, and his own building. Then he put his son's name on the lease. That is what separates richness from true wealth. Richness is what you have. Wealth is what survives you. The Miller family is building something designed to survive for a very long time. From the kitchen of Dooky Chase's restaurant to the recording studios of Cash Money, from the boardrooms of Liberty Bank to the No Limit tank rolling through every genre and industry it could touch, Black families in Louisiana have been constructing financial fortresses that history has tried and failed to tear down. They survived Reconstruction. They survived Jim Crow. They survived the levees breaking, the city drowning, and the developers circling. And they are still here, still building, still expanding, still collecting the receipts. Which of these Louisiana dynasties left the biggest impression on you? Was it the boardroom brilliance of the Williams brothers, or the generational permanence of the McDonald family? Drop your answer in the comments. If you want to see how black wealth is rising in other cities across this country, there's a video on your screen that you need to watch next. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world of power, legacy, and hidden wealth.